PR's top pros talk using information management to understand communications objectives, featuring Mark Weiner, Chief Insights Officer at PublicRelay. And here's your host, Doug Simon.
In your book, Pure Technology, Data, and Insights, Mark, which we're showing right here, you say, begin simply, simply begin. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Sure. That came to me from a chalkboard in front of an Ojai, California coffee shop that changed its message every day, Zen Message. And it struck me that this applies to what I do, in that communicators think that research is too complicated, too sophisticated, too expensive for them. And it struck me that this saying applied to me and to our profession, that instead of overcomplicating out of the gate, begin simply, but simply begin. And in the book, there are recommendations for simple methods, simple counting even, that'll help to reinforce a measurement and evaluation mindset. And then as the users become more sophisticated and the recipients of that research begin to understand the unique contribution public relations can make through quantifiable performance, budgets will increase, resources will expand, and the position of public relations within the organization will evolve.
Yeah, one of the things I really liked about it was you're advising companies to first take a look at to what extent they're using technology and data to really understand the business environment for them. And by phrasing it that way, it's not like you must do this 100%. It aligns with begin simply because wait, are they doing it to 10%, 25%, 50%? How do they go about doing that?
Understanding the organization's position and its landscape begins with it can be free. I would expect most communicators are already aware of the organization's objectives. And what we recommend is called an executive audit, which can be done using your own resources. I think it works better when there's a third party to ensure objectivity and confidentiality. But that's one aspect, to understand from the executives who have some influence over public relations performance evaluation and public relations resource allocation, to ask them a series of questions, which I think appear in the book also, about the degree to which what's important for public relations to do, and how does public relations perform relative to competitors within the category. That's one element. That's the key, in my opinion, to proving value, is understanding the value equation that's often hidden within organizations. The other aspects are more environmental, to look at competitors, whether it's media coverage, to the degree that you can discover their objectives, at least on their website where they often appear. And for those organizations that have the resources, this information can be gathered through social media, through traditional media, and through surveys of these different audience stakeholders.
Yeah, let me jump in with a quick question, because one of the challenges you talk about is making sure that those objectives are measurable. How do you go about doing that, especially if you're starting out by begin simply beginning? How do you make them measurable?
Let me answer in a slightly maybe unexpected way. You and I have been judges of PR competitions for decades together. And in those instructions, there are elements that require quantifiable data to ensure that there was an objective, a measurable objective, and that in the end, that campaign or that program met or beat the objective. And yet, at least in my experience, 70% of those submissions are eliminated prima facie because they have objectives in there like generate significant buzz. So there's questions about what buzz even is. And when do you suddenly tip over to significant? This is insignificant and this is it. This is significant. Right. There's no way to know. Or break through the media clutter. So in other words, there's no way to know whether the program succeeded or not. Measurable objectives can be simple in terms of make it counting, things that you can manage on your own in-house. How many stories? If you have the resources to in-house to count the number of positive versus negative. There's in those executive audits that I was describing a moment ago, executive responses to the most important aspects of PR fit this model of reasonable, meaningful, and measurable. And this, it's a bell curve. In the center, the most popular answers, and this has been true through many thousands of interviews with senior executives, for-profits, not-for-profits, international, domestic, the whole gamut. And what comes out on top is delivering positive key messages to target audiences and raising awareness. In the middle section are things like quality completion of projects, or meeting and beating objectives, or beating the competition. For that section, you don't need sophisticated metrics. At the bottom are things like clip counting and ad value, which is reasonable and measurable, but it means nothing. And when given a choice, these executives recognize that it means nothing. On the far end are measures like driving sales or driving the stock price, which is really meaningful, which is hard to measure, and so not particularly reasonable. And the purpose of this survey, and it only involves maybe 30 key decision makers, is to foster the one-on-one conversations that are required to achieve a compromise. So to get these people who want clip counts and get these people who want sales, attributable sales, to sort of meet in the middle. And that's a way of starting simply, beginning simply, and simply beginning is that's one way to start, is to understand the landscape in which you're operating and then design measurement programs for what's reasonable or affordable, given your resources. Or if management feels strongly enough about these more esoteric measures, then they have to fund it. And if they do, then got resources.
Then it's a win for everyone. And, that reminds me, I wouldn't question your data accuracy in saying we've been judging events and known each other for decades, but just for clarity, we don't go as far back as the cave painters that you've referenced in your book. But I do want to talk next about part 2 of your book.
It's all relative. To a lot of people, I think we are cave painters.
Speak for yourself. I'm not going there. The second part of your book talks about the Pure Continuum.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
You've described 2 elements that precede this continuum. These are the landscape analysis that I described, which leads to setting measurable objectives. And then there's a strategy element. Strategy, in my opinion, is an overused term, but it means message development and targeting. If you have those 2 elements, then you can know the media that you're targeting, the people you're trying to reach, and what you seek to say to those people. The continuum kicks in once you have that, and there's an event. An event may be a new product announcement, it may be whatever people announce. It begins with the targeting exercise that was part of the strategy development, so we know which media we're seeking to reach. There's a production element, which you're familiar with, that involves either writing a press release, producing an SMT, and then there's a distribution. So now we're moving around the continuum, there's distribution. And since public relations is only semi-controllable, unlike advertising, we need to monitor to see whether or the extent to which these messages appeared in our preferred media or in any media at all, and the degree to which those messages appeared at all within the context. So we know that journalists have a role to meet journalistic standards. That often means presenting both sides of the story, whereas social media is more direct. But for traditional media, it may be that there's opposing opinions. And it could be that those opposing opinions are more powerful than your own intended messaging. So now that we're about halfway around the continuum and we have monitored, then we analyze what we've gathered to see the degree and measure the degree to which those messages appeared, the degree to which they were positive or neutral or negative, the degree to which our competitors appeared in that content. And then the final step in the continuum is to apply what we've learned for continuous improvement. And so that in that way, the continuum continues. Through every cycle, we should be getting smarter and smarter about our target audiences, about our distribution and our findings and how we interpret those findings. But it also may affect the underlying strategy. That could be that some of these objectives that management wants are unrealistic. And over time, it's proven that maybe these attributes are not associated with our company, and we need to take a slightly different position. But typically, strategy and targeting lasts for years and years. So that's what I mean by the communications continuum, is that it's a cycle. Some people think of public relations as a linear process with a beginning and an end. I would suggest that we learn through every cycle and improve through every cycle, so we get better and better over time.
Yeah, and I think that people who take your advice will be well served. In addition to being one of the nicest guys in our industry, you're also one of the most thoughtful, and you've also been kind enough for those who watch this segment all the way through to offer us a discount code with the post if people want to check out your new book. Congrats on the book. We really appreciate having you on the show. Thanks for everything.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to your viewers and listeners. We'll post the discount code after the event. I'm also very proud to say that bookauthority.com has named this book, along with my first book, among the 100 most important PR books in history. And this new book was named one of the top 5 books to read in 2022. So that's very gratifying.
Great. Well, congratulations on that. And we're hoping we can push you to #1. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Okay.